Welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today, we are diving into this week's news, and we've got many stories on the docket to talk about. Well, the dust has settled on the helpful content update recoveries and what happened out of Google's August core update. We have not addressed and have not talked about that interview with Danny Sullivan that happened and got released during the core update. There's so much inside of this, and Danny's been at the center of so much of what bloggers have wanted to talk about as it relates to core updates and helpful content updates. So we're going to dive into that story. We do have some interesting data that has come out of the helpful content update sites and their recoveries in the core update. We'll get into that. We're talking about a very, very popular publishing ad agency banning AI sites. And so we're going to get into that story. We've got, of course, our side hustles. We've got some very weird niches. And I'm joined today by my favorite freelancer, Morgan Overholt. Morgan, welcome.
Oh, what an honor. Thank you so much, Jared. It's always nice to be back on the Niche Pursuits podcast, and I'm excited to dive into some of these topics today.
I was thinking about it, you kind of have hung your hat on being a freelancer as your day job, and you're kind of turning into like the weekly Friday podcast freelance host here, so it's great.
Well, freelancing is one of those things that brought me into the blogging realm to begin with. So to me, it's a bit of a fusion of both of my worlds whenever I'm on Niche Pursuits talking about freelancing and blogging.
Comes naturally to you. Well, good. So much to get into today. Before we even hit our headline story, I actually have, I feel like I'm in a newscaster desk right now. We got breaking news. This came out about 15 minutes ago, just before we hit the podcast. OpenAI has announced a brand new model. It's codenamed Strawberry. It's O1 is the technical model name. Basically, it solves difficult problems step by step. I'll just read a quick couple sentences. We don't have much more on it, so we're going to move on from what I wanted you to know. Unlike previous models, it focuses on solving complex problems step by step, rather than just providing us with immediate answers. It uses a new type of learning called reinforcement learning. It represents a shift in AI models. They're going to incorporate it into GPT-5, it sounds like, whenever that comes out. So anyways, they have released it to some people. I have heard of a few people who've already gotten their hands and started playing with it. We'll talk more about it in the weeks to come once we kind of get more time underneath us. But with 15 minutes, I just thought I would mention it. Okay, let's dive into our first story. And this is this interview that came out. It came out over a week ago, just so that we're clear. But it's an interview with Danny Sullivan, which is Google's search liaison. Now, Danny has been kind of that go-between or that bridge between the blogging community, especially the blogging community that's been hit by the helpful content update, and Google themselves. Danny has been stuck, I say, in a position where he's trying to communicate the needs of the bloggers back to Google and trying to communicate to bloggers what's going on with these updates. And sometimes it doesn't always land as well as it could. Perhaps not his fault. Perhaps he's just literally the liaison. So he did a very long interview. It's, I will say Barry Schwartz was the one who did the interview. I've got an article write-up in front of us here on the live version, SEOroundtable.com. I thought Barry did a really good job. I'll just cut to the chase. He asked all the questions I would have wanted to ask. He has a rapport with Danny, so that also shined through. Morgan, you and I are just going to, we talked about this ahead of time. We're just going to go back and forth and talk about the things that stood out. We're not going to be able to get to the whole interview. You should read it. It is really insightful. There are some really good things in it. Let's see. I'm going to pull out a couple sound bites here. Barry asked about helpful content update recovery. So why didn't we see improvements until this last update for some of the impacted sites? Danny said he didn't seem to know, basically saying it's difficult to say because the March core update was a whole new system. We should come back to that whole new system. On the topic of parasite SEO, Danny specifically said, I quote, "There's no algorithmic action. I don't expect there to be any algorithmic action anytime in the near future." And I remember they told us that there was going to be algorithmic action that would going to come out in early May of 2024. We haven't seen it. Looks like it's not coming anytime soon. Let's see. On the topic of hidden gems, Danny said, where we went out with it was focused on social content. So where they released it into the algorithm was focused, it sounds like, solely on social content. So hidden gems were not going to be surfaced on our websites in essence. Danny went on to say he would like to see other forms of hidden gems rewarded by future updates. I got a lot more. Morgan, let me turn it over to you for your initial thoughts, your thoughts on what I brought up, and then anything else you wanted to discuss.
Do you ever get stuck in your business and wish you had someone you could turn to for solutions? Well, I think you should consider joining the Niche Pursuits community. You'll get weekly calls with experts on growing a successful online business, and you'll also get assigned a small mastermind group where you can solve your business problems as well as share your wins. For a limited time, I'll let you try out the Niche Pursuits community for just $1. Go ahead and use coupon code PODCAST at checkout in order to get your first month for just $1. Again, that's coupon code PODCAST. Go to community.nichepursuits.com today and see what it's all about. And maybe I'll see you on our call next week. Thanks a lot.
Well, let me just say first, the length of this article is tremendous. I originally tried to start reading it last week when it first came out, and then decided I'd just wait on the movie. But after seeing myself on the schedule for the Niche Pursuits podcast this week, I was like, all right, I'll just dive into this novel. Let's take a crack at it, right? I want to point out a few different things. Like, obviously, I think that Barry did a really great job. You can tell, like you said, that his rapport with Danny is really evident in this, and Danny feels comfortable with him, which is great because we've really not seen a lot of really insightful interviews with Danny, really personal one-on-one interviews with Danny, in the SEO industry quite like this. So thank you to Barry for doing that. I will tell you all, don't expect though anything that, at least I personally considered coming at this with my blogger goggles on and someone who was hit by the HCU, that's going to be anything any big revelations. I'll say that much, right? A lot of this is kind of the same stuff that we've been hearing for a while. I did count this up. Jared, you might find this kind of interesting, but Danny, it's in some form, said he wished Google was better at something in this article 11 times. I counted that up 11 times. He said, I wish Google was better at, Google needs to improve doing this. 11 different mentions of that. But there are some hidden gems in here, including a message. Right. I didn't even mean to do that. Including a message from Danny to the people who are hurting, because Barry asked very specifically about that. Like, basically, what would you say, to some of these people who are hurting and who are holding on, who have been holding on for a long time, and I don't know if I should read this entire quote, but, he basically said that I don't want to take anything away from the lived experience of these other kinds of sites that are clearly producing good content. I know their heart's in the right place, and our ranking systems are not doing a good enough job for them that they probably should do. So, he is acknowledging it, but again, like always, as someone who's personally hit by this, does it make a difference? Does it move a needle for me? Not necessarily.
Yeah. The sentiment, I think, has always been there with Danny. At times, his delivery can, rub people the wrong way, but Spencer and I have long talked on this podcast about how difficult of a position he's in. I think perhaps this article, more than any other thing I've read from him since the Helpful Content Update hit, kind of conveyed that sentimentality and the fact that, he feels like someone who does care as much as he can about people who have put their heart and soul into their site, have focused on producing good content. And I use the air quotes again, because I have some quotes about that, and then haven't seen not only reward, but recovery. I think, let me just touch on a couple other things, and we'll get into a couple of the things that I think are a little bit more difficult to talk through. But on the topic of AI and scaled content abuse, Danny said that the community seemed to take the first half of our statement on this when they released this back in May, and ignored the second half. The first half of the statement was that we're not really focused on how the content is created, whether or not the content is helpful. And that got turned into a bunch of people as if Google doesn't care if content is AI, which is the wrong message. Quote, the message that should have been taken from that is it helpful? It is less about if it is AI generated or not. It's just the question of, are you producing a lot of content at scale to rank well in search? I think that dovetails interestingly into one of our other topics we're going to talk about today with AI content at scale. This was where things got squirrely again. And I feel like, to your point, Morgan, you said, like, if you put your blogging glasses on and read this article, like, I'm not sure you're getting anything new. You are, but I'm not sure. And let me read this quote, because I think this might actually dovetail into what you were talking about. Danny said, as I said several times on social elsewhere, if you know you're producing great content for your readers, that's your touchstone, your North Star, whatever you want to call it. If you're feeling confused about what to do in terms of rankings, our systems want to reward this type of content. If you know you're producing it, just keep doing that. And it's up to us to keep working our systems to better reward it. And it's like, that's not giving anybody any hope.
Yeah, it feels like customer service. We're working on it. Please hold. I feel like we might as well have some of that annoying elevator music while we wait 11 months to see something happen to our websites, And again, even though we have seen some recoveries, and I don't want to go too far down in this rabbit hole until our next segment, a lot of the recoveries we've seen so far are still very slight, right? And so having that paired with this interview where a lot of it's kind of like, hey, we need to do better. We need to do better. We're thinking about it. We're focusing on it. It just doesn't seem to be, it just seems to be, I don't know how to politely word this, but I take this with such a grain of salt now. I feel like I've heard this over and over again at this point, and it just has less and less meaning every time. I do want to bring up one kind of interesting thing, though. Actually, I would say personally, I found this to be the most interesting thing in this interview. It is the conversation around the feedback form. Because I know a lot of people in March over that feedback form, they were like, I'm tired of talking about it. I feel like Google's not listening to me. I am not filling that thing out. Well, I'm not one of those people. I was tired of talking about it. I do feel like Google's not listening, but I filled out the contact or the feedback form. All right. And one of the things that I repeatedly pointed out, and even though Danny says he makes very clear that he did not reward or punish any specific site who filled out the feedback form, it was just taken into general consideration. But one of the things that I made clear over and over again was, especially on my freelance blog, I was being outranked by the same domain in like a dozen positions, and it was happening over and over. And I literally just said in my feedback form, hey, doesn't this go against Google's own diversity policies? When you search for a query, even if somebody's looking for this particular site or this particular form, do they want to see it in the whole first 1.5 to 2 full pages of search results? Or do we want to surface some other option in there? And notably, Jared, at least on my sites where I saw that happening before, where I saw the same domain outranking me 10, 11, 12 times, it's now only outranking me like 2 or 3 times. So I actually did see that notable change. And I do feel like, some of what I said was heard. Again, is it enough to move the needle significantly? No. But have I seen a notable change on the specific feedback I provided? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of he talked a lot about that form and the back and the forth he's had with the engineers about it, and how he's read I think he said he read every single. Did I read 1,300 submissions? I think I saw.
12,000 individual submissions and 13 unique domains. I'm curious, does that number seem high or low to you? 12,000 submissions and 1,300 domains.
It's hard to say. Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, low.
It seems low to me too.
A lot when you think about reading every one of those individually. I guess that's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
But
it's like a lower number than I expected because I've seen so many complaints and I know this hits so many websites. But then if I was Danny, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. So yeah, it's I guess it depends on your perspective.
Yeah, it does put into perspective. Like if you're being told the sky is falling, and then you say, okay, cool, tell me where the sky is falling, and a minuscule amount of the internet is actually telling you where the sky is falling. I mean, it could also be I didn't do the form because I'm like, kind of like what you were saying, skeptical, and I don't want my sites to get, I did site. So I don't know how many people were like me, but anyways,
tisk.
Well, hey, I'm filling out the form every single week on the podcast. How's that?
There you go. Hey, Danny, if you're watching.
We've invited him on so many times publicly here in the podcast. I'm not sure about that. But actually, I digress. We don't want to spend the whole time on this topic. I thought, and I'm going to leave it to the listeners to go read about his plumbing example. And I thought that was interesting, fascinating, sort of confirms some of the things we've been talking about in terms of what you need to do to stand out, experience, personal antidotes, examples, and yet it often played against itself in Danny's example as well. So it almost circled the wagons, I felt like, on why we're here. We're here because it's almost conflicting advice to what was said about the plumbing example, and about if you're a plumber, why aren't you ranking? But then what could you do to rank? And so that really kind of underscores the quagmire that I think Google is in as they try to figure out where AI content plays into everything, as they try to figure out where small publishers play their way into all this. It is a difficult situation. I mean, we talked a lot about even just solving parasite SEO algorithmically. So notably, they got a lot of work to do. Danny recognized that, as you said, 11 times. I'm glad you counted. It gives us a good barometer. But it's not an easy job.
In some form or another.
So, took a few liberties there, but it's a great read. We're trying to summarize the high levels. I think if we could summarize, there's not some groundbreaking news that was dropped here, but there's a lot of context behind a lot of the topics that have been dancing around for the last year, and it's well worth the read.
Yep. And there was one other item on ads, but I'm actually going to hold that for our next segment because it plays into that so very well. Because I think there's another myth here that we need to not quite bust, but clarify perhaps in our HCU findings as it relates to that.
So do I get to go on to the next one, or do you want to drop it now?
Oh, let's go ahead.
Perfect. The with the transition was always there. We're kind of sliding into talking about the helpful content update sites, right? And the sites that got hit by September 2023. Subsequently, in many cases, the core update of March 2024, and then how sites did. We finally saw movement in the core update of August 2024. Most of you know that by now. Here is a study by Moz that is titled "The Helpful Content Update Was Not What You Think," and we have to acknowledge that it's a study by Moz and it features some of their tools. So we'll put that out there. But with that out of the way, they are saying from studies that instead of it being about helpful content per se, that Google might be penalizing sites with a disproportionate ratio of backlinks to brand and navigational searches. So the study was done by Tom Capper, and his analysis of winners and losers from the helpful content update shows that sites with a strong brand authority, what they call BA, relative to domain authority, DA, perform better. So in other words, the stronger your kind of brand signals, brand traffic, etc., compared to your overall domain authority, your overall backlink profile, the better your site did. And an overemphasis on backlinks, but less navigational interest was demoted. And so this is really interesting. It really does dovetail into a lot of the things we've talked about up until this point. We've all talked about building a brand as an HCU, kind of anti-HCU sort of thing, as a way to kind of survive the HCU. But it's interesting to see a study that's kind of sort of, proved that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, and perhaps not the best of use for all of those link sellers, right? I mean, your PR campaigns are really important. Links are really important. We know that. That's a fact. But if you're just spending all of your time gaining links and you not enough time promoting your brand, it looks like that might not be working in your favor. It looks like you kind of need to simultaneously do both. And I got to say, if this is what they're doing, I wish that they were a little bit more open about it, because I don't think that's something that can necessarily easily be gamed, right? In fact, that's one of the only things you really can't quite easily game with an algorithm is promoting your own brand. So I would like to see them come forward and say, hey, yes, your own brand is really, really important. But yeah, so I'm honestly not like, I don't know, honestly, I'm kind of a fan. Had there been more transparency around that, if this actually does prove to be true. And looking at this Moz study, I mean, it does look like, and again, HCU, we all know, multifactorial, and I will get into some of the other possible factors here in the next little bit, but I think this could be one of them for sure, just looking at this study.
Yeah, we've talked about, hey, how do we talk brand? Like, how does Google look at brand? We've looked at like branded search queries. So how well do you rank for your branded search term? How much estimated traffic is that bringing in? You can start to look at that, but that's only part of the picture. It's only a small part of the picture, frankly. You've got your social traffic, you've got your social signals, you've got traffic from direct sources, you've got email, you've got all these components that go into it. You can see on the screen, and if you're not watching the screen, losers in the HCU had an average DA to BA ratio of 2.0. So I guess we could say that would be almost 2 links for every brand authority, metric marker. Trying to keep this without going too deep into the weeds here. So 2, and so obviously a lower number would signify less or more branded, basically more brand authority. And so the neutral sites, the ones that were unimpacted, and then the ones that won in the helpful content update, both had pretty much the same ratio, and it was 1.39 and 1.4. So substantially less, in terms of data analysis. Like, that's a significantly lower number of direct, domain authority to brand authority. So again, if you were hit by the helpful content update, probably a essential mandatory read here. I think you had some interesting things to talk about. I don't want to steal your thunder here, but you definitely we were talking about last week, House Fresh and their recovery, almost full recovery as of last week. And I think you had some interesting things to say that I've heard other people talk about. So I want to make sure you had time to kind of share that and talk about how it relates to this here.
Well, okay. So just putting a bit of a tinfoil hat on here, but everyone on Twitter, SEO Twitter at least, seems to be all up in House Fresh's business saying, hey, look, they were they were public, so that's why they got a recovery, right? Or they complained, that's why they got a recovery. But let's just pose the question, knowing what we now know about brands, what if House Fresh, by being very vocal, made a brand name for themselves? So with that theory, I plugged that data into SEMrush and actually took a look at their brand search. And guess what, Jared? In May is when they originally published that article about, or originally started talking about what happened with Google. In May, the brand terms for House Fresh skyrocketed. So now, do I think that there's some kind of like crazy theory about how Google manually did something for them? No, I personally do not believe that. But could that actually be related in some way for their brand? If this Moz study is correct, yes, actually getting yourself out there does promote your brand, turns out. So it technically could have helped them, just not in the way people think. That's my theory.
I mean, tinfoil, yes, but data wise, like there's at least an argument for it. You've been very vocal online about the effects of the update. You also haven't, though, been attaching your domain to your vocalness, right? And you didn't recover. So these are obviously a very small sample size, but
actually interesting. So I have a couple of different sites. One's a travel site. That's the one I don't put my domain out there for. But of course, my name, Morgan Overholt, was the brand my freelance site was associated with. And actually, that one did start to recover. I mean, not a massive recover, just a smaller one. I'm back up to March levels. And guess what, Jared? My brand name, Morgan Overholt, also started going up this year as I was getting myself out there. So you've heard it here, folks. Complaining, a ranking factor.
Not a direct ranking factor, an indirect ranking factor. So you just got to make sure you get publicity out of it. That's the key.
Right.
No, I think, funny analogies aside, it's always interesting when you read a study that deduces something like this, and it makes sense. And I guess I would say that this kind of makes sense. You said the HCU was multiple factors, many, many factors, but at least at first glance, this makes a lot of sense, and it substantiates a lot of the pretty nuanced ideas and theories that have been surfaced over the last 11 to 12 months now.
I also want to quickly bring up the Lily Ray podcast because I know Lily was doing all she could to get the word out, have people listen to this podcast. She even, and I thank you for this, Lily, if you're listening, she's even slid into my DMs and was like, hey, I wanted to make sure that you saw this podcast and listened to it when I was out of town, which I so appreciated. And I wanted to put this on everybody's radar because she too, a bit like the Moz study, released some of her findings about why she thinks sites were hit by the HCU. I did pull just a couple of quick quotes, but I will say as a highlight, some of the things she listed were aggressive ads, a lot of affiliate links, and basically content that was otherwise not monetized with anything else. The podcast name is the Publisher's Playbook Podcast, and the title of the episode is Google's Unhelpful Content Update. But just a quick quote from Lily, because I know I want to make sure I don't paraphrase her too much. I want to speak as directly as I can because I respect her so much. She says, the types of websites that were disproportionately affected by the HCU, usually niche blogs, and a lot of them were monetized with popular monetization methods where there's a lot of ads all over the site, in some cases very aggressive ads, and a lot of them have a lot of affiliate links. The nature of a site like this is that it churns out a lot of content that is extremely optimized for search. Search is probably where they're getting 50, maybe 80, let's say 80% plus of their traffic. And let's say 80% of the pages on this site have aggressive monetization and very little else, like there isn't an e-commerce store, there isn't a section of content that's not monetized, etc. Now, I butchered that quote a little bit because I had to put certain things into brackets, because audio doesn't always translate into a beautiful quote. But that is what was basically said. And I just thought those were really interesting insights, especially as teased earlier, in the Danny Sullivan interview, he also mentions ads because this is something I'm constantly seeing people go back and forth on, right? Like your ad providers will tell you ads aren't a factor at all. Go ahead and load your site up. More ads, the better. And then you'll hear so many other people say, oh no, Google doesn't like ads. But the truth is really somewhere in between, right? In the interview with Barry, Danny actually says the Google paid, well, let me back up a little bit. Barry says, and then Danny offers a quote. The Google Page Experience Guide doesn't say you can't have ads. Many sites that rank well do have ads, Sullivan said, according to the article. There are plenty of sites out there that have ads that people don't like because then they can encounter them in search and then they complain, why does the site have so many ads? That being said, Sullivan said that there is more Google can do here to make it clearer. I would love to see us get into a better state where we can point people to page experience stuff to understand what's going on because it's so important. So when we're talking about ads, are they directly a ranking factor? Again, it's kind of like is complaining a ranking factor, right? Not directly, but indirectly, they can be affecting your page experience, which then can become a ranking factor. So just kind of keep those things in mind, guys. And again, I'm really thankful to Moz and to Lily and all the people who are out there putting out these kinds of studies and putting out their findings for free, by the way. That is the kind of stuff that honestly, as a blogger, especially a blogger who's been hit by all of this and my life has been rocked by it, that I genuinely appreciate from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I said this week in my email newsletter, that we're starting to better understand what it is to make helpful content, and it's really content that people find helpful, and we have to look at other things than maybe we're used to, like page experience, time on site, and all these other types of metrics to kind of feed into what helpful content update is. The challenge is understanding how an algorithm picks up on that and then feeds that back, and how we learn to continue to do it, because the feedback loop isn't quite the same as it used to be. That's always so hard, right? It's like the feedback loop we're used to has changed so much. That's great. I mean, it's a well put set of quotes, and it ties everything back together. And Morgan, you're getting really good at this podcast hosting stuff. Transitions us perfectly into our final topic. We're always looking for good transitions here as podcast hosts, and you're really getting it. Segue, 100% A+. We're talking about Mediavine. Speaking of ads, now Mediavine made waves, I believe it was late last week, when they banned one of their websites, one of the sites that's on Mediavine, and they banned it for AI. Overuse of AI, I believe is the term. Now, it first started getting shared on Twitter. Search Engine Journal ended up doing an article on it. That's what I have here. And basically what we have is that Mediavine bans publisher. At the time the story came out, single publisher, but I have more to share about that. Bans a publisher for overuse of AI-generated content. Basically, they have something in their terms and conditions where they have a commitment to maintaining quality standards. Basically, this user was terminated by the publisher for excessive use of low-quality, mass-produced AI content, which violated Mediavine's policy against using AI to replace legitimate content creators. This is interesting on a number of points because, as the article says, it kind of signals, I think this is a little bit of an overdramatic statement for the record, but I'll just read it. It signals an emerging industry crackdown on deceptive AI tactics. Now, a big deal was made about this because a lot of publishers use AI. A lot of publishers in Mediavine use AI. And so this idea of where is too far, where is unhelpful, where is mass produced, it goes back to the comment that was surfaced in the interview with Danny Sullivan and the overscaling of content. So I think this kind of touched on a lot of different things. I am in the Mediavine Facebook group because I have a couple sites on Mediavine. Their chief revenue officer did share something about it. And it basically was along the lines of that she said this: we're in favor of publishers using AI responsibly as a tool to enhance their own work, but not as a replacement for creators. So they're really kind of drawing this line in the sand. Now, if you also were to read on in that, it would say that they've actually banned more than one. So they say that multiple ones. So the one that got shared and got passed around on Reddit and Twitter, I think that's interesting because context is important. And then I'll pause. But the context there is it's someone who has gone out and publicly shared how they are basically, and I am paraphrasing, but spamming the internet with mass-produced AI content. So to some degree, this site that we know about that got banned certainly was being very public about what they were doing, which does go against something Mediavine's been very public about. So what do you think about all this? What do you think about the potential for your site to get kicked out of Mediavine one day because you're using AI content?
I mean, this was a roller coaster of emotions, right? First, I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, one more thing to have to worry about, right? First of all, we barely use any AI content, but still we use it to like fix grammar, come up with different headline ideas. And I know how inaccurate a lot of these AI content detecting, machines and different things can be. So at first I was a little bit scared, but then I started to kind of learn a little bit more about it. And first, let me just say, I really love the fact that, I really love that Mediavine came out and basically said in response to this, without publishers, there is no open web, there is no content to train the models that power AI, and therefore there is no internet. And the more I dug into this, like there's a tweet here by Mike, I don't know how to say his last name, Futia?
I'm glad you said it, yeah.
Sure, Mike. I apologize, butchered that entirely, I'm sure. But
he is a listener,
there's some
so he heard you mispronounce it, just so you know.
I know. So sorry, Mike. And people mispronounce my name all the time as well, I know. But there is some speculation that this particular user, the one at least people are talking about, is that same guy that was featured in the Confessions of an AI Clickbait Kingpin several months ago. And it looks
that
like
article too.
There's also some speculation about the same on Reddit, the helpful content producer of the internet. So if Reddit says it, it's got to be true, right?
Of course. There you got your Reddit reference in this podcast. Good for you.
I couldn't miss it. But no, I mean, if that's true, let me just say though, if that is true, I am happy to see this, right? I went from being really scared to feeling kind of comforted, because this is the kind of stuff that we don't want to promote, that we don't want to encourage. This is the kind of stuff that steals directly from bloggers and content producers. So I went from being like a little scared to, oh, wait a minute, Mediavine really has our backs. This is actually a great move, I think, for genuine content producers like myself and others.
I talked to a number of publishers about this just in passing over the last week or two since this came out. And I think if I were to read the temperature of publishers, it would be very similar to what you're saying. I think nobody really is in favor of mass AI publishing overtaking their content. Like that's not something that people want for the world. And publishers are publishers because they publish and they kind of are creators. And I think what this touched on, and maybe touched on for you, but touched on for a lot of people is, well, I sure hope that's the line. I hope that this open-ended policy that doesn't have a lot of parameters around it doesn't slip into something that all of a sudden now it can become politics, it can become a game, it can become maybe manipulated. And I'm certainly not suggesting that it will be that. I think that if these sorts of situations that you shared where this actually is going is probably a very big win for people who are really out there genuinely publishing good content. And if it can stay that way and that policy can just be focused on banning those types of people, I think overall, like you said, publishers are going to see this as a good move, not necessarily a scary move.
And you know where else you can find really quality original content? Medium. Sorry, I'm just trying that segue thing out, Jared. I'm trying that segue thing out.
Good. That is good. See, you're now you're getting too good at this. You're taking my job from me. Spencer's not going to need me anymore. That's the news. That is a wrap. And man, we had like 4 or 5 more topics that I really wanted to talk about that we couldn't get to today. So it was one of those weeks. Maybe we'll surface 1 or 2 of them next week. We'll probably talk about that OpenAI story next week.
Hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. Are you adding a new internal link pointing to each article you publish? You should be. Ever find it time-consuming and a bit overwhelming? Remembering what content you publish and deciding which anchor text to use can be a real headache. What if there was a better way? Well, that's exactly why I created Link Whisper. Simply click Add Inbound Internal Links, and Link Whisper will scan your site in seconds and suggest the most relevant links with appropriate anchor text for your new article. Now simply check the box next to the internal links you want to add, and Link Whisper will add these links for you. No need to go into each article, edit, and add the link. It's already done. No more manual internal link building or guesswork. Just efficient, accurate linking that saves you time and improves your SEO. Transform your content strategy with Link Whisper. Start linking smarter, not harder. use the coupon code podcast for $15 off. Head over to linkwhisper.com and use coupon code podcast to get $15 off.
Hey, we got to move into side hustles. So I wanted to close out the news though on this one thing. This is interesting. I pulled this up while we were talking because it hit me. It's mid-September. And sure enough, this podcast will release on a Friday. And Saturday is the 1-year anniversary of the helpful content update getting released. So, wow, it's been a year of craziness. And we actually are at the 365-day mark here. And what a way to close out 1 year of absolute craziness in the Google world.
I don't even know what to tell my baker to make the cake look like, right? I mean, how do you celebrate that anniversary?
Yeah, boy. But we'll put that to rest and move on to our side hustles. The side hustle game has gotten more fun, though, as a result of the HCU. I think a lot of people have been enjoying that. I'll go first. Let's see. You hit the nail on the head. We're talking Medium here. I have a number of things I could talk about, but Medium is really interesting. I've been doing Medium for just about a month now, and it's had its ups and its downs. I think that a lot of people have taken my excitement about the platform to mean that I'm killing it and doing amazing. And I would say that that's far from it. I love Medium as a platform, and a month in, I love it just as much as when I started. But I love it because it really is a place where you can go and write and you can share your content. And for me, it's a place I'm sharing my content that goes out of my newsletter. And like when I send out my weekly newsletter with Weekend Growth, I don't really ever expect that content to rank because it's just me free, I'm just free form writing. And it does well in a newsletter because people like that. It has, personality and, all the things that make newsletters successful, right? It does well. But if I were to put that in a blog, like it would never rank for anything because it's got no formatting and it's got no keyword use. And I mean, maybe now in Google's environment, it would rank. But what's interesting is that the content that does well in the newsletter does well on Medium. And so I think that's why I love Medium is it's this wonderful place to put content that I've already seen done well. I do think there's a place, though, for certain types of content that people write for their websites to also go on Medium. So here's what I've learned a month in. I'll say from the outset, earnings are still pretty flat. I've earned about $150 at the 1 month mark. So don't quit your day job. That's not going to pay anybody's bills. But yeah, I've also learned that it's a much slower burn to success than, like, say, the Amazon influencer program or something. And a lot of the things I've learned is about it's a faster response loop, but it's still a lot about getting your name out there, getting your followership built up, getting stories out there, making sure those stories have high read times or high read, percent that people read through them. And then it's about getting in publications. So I've been able to get a couple of stories in publications. And I just today was able to get my story in a brand new publication and probably the biggest publication that I've been able to get into. It's called the Better Marketing publication. So that story went live today when the podcast comes out. It'll be a day or two in the rears. And then the second thing is that until you have a good amount of followers, it sure seems like you need to get articles boosted in order to make good ad revenue. Now, my first article that I made money on was boosted. I made over $100 off that article. That's where the majority of my income has come from. And so I think really this process is about publishing content, getting followers, getting that content in different publications so that you're introduced to new followers and introduced to a larger group of people to read your articles. And then some of them, when they fit and they make sense, getting them boosted and earning that ad revenue. And over time, you can kind of start seeing the types of stuff that Thomas Smith has done and how he's earning $3,000-4,000 a month off Medium. And I think he had like a $20,000 a month at one point. So that's my Medium update. So it's good and bad. It's good in that I feel like every week I'm learning more about it. I'm getting more followers and I'm getting into publications. It's bad because I'm nowhere near quitting my day job on it.
A confession, I didn't really understand what Medium was at all until I heard you and Tom talking about it on the podcast. I know I've read Medium articles, but I didn't really see it as its own social media ecosystem. I haven't had a few articles on Medium just because a long time ago, another publication commissioned me to write a few Medium articles. And I also posted just a couple of things that kind of like lost rankings from my blog on there several months ago, but I it was kind of a set it, forget it, don't understand it, whatever. I occasionally see some traffic and affiliate sales coming through it. I didn't even know about the partner program. So my mind is very much blown. Like I had no idea that was a thing. So I've already signed up for like Thomas's course, and I'm very curious after seeing what you did with it. So I might have to follow in your all's footsteps and report back. I don't know. It's interesting though. It's really interesting.
I feel like, there's some topics that do better on Pinterest than others, right? Like more visual topics do better on Pinterest. So if you're like a financial blog, Pinterest, maybe not your jam, maybe I could be proven wrong, but generally speaking, like that's not your jam, right? Medium, I feel like has kind of some of those categories as well. And I feel like from now being in Medium and like looking at the articles that I get sent every day and just kind of trying to satiate myself with it, I feel like freelancing topics would do really well on Medium. I feel like there's a whole ecosystem and a whole community there that is all about that and dying to learn about it from a voice like yours.
Yeah, I did try, and I didn't even look at it recently. I did put up one article kind of based on one of my newsletters, kind of like you said to do, more or less. And it wasn't even very long, just to kind of see what would happen. And just pulling up my stats, it looks like it's had a handful of reads. Oh, I've made 60 cents. But it looks like I have... Oh, wait a minute, though. Is this correct? It says I have a lot of claps and reads.
Claps are good. Claps are like likes.
I have like 51 claps on this.
That's
so
very
yeah,
good.
It's interesting. I could definitely see as somebody with just like 25 followers, if I spent some time on this, I think the freelance niche, this could be a pretty good partnership there with Medium. So yeah, I'm definitely curious about it for sure. I think it's enough of a spark at least to get me to try it out, see what happens.
Well, Morgan, I just checked, and you're not following me on Medium. So,
oh no, sure? I swear I thought I was.
I have so few followers that I can actually check in the amount of time it takes you to kind of give a 1 or 2 sentence blurb. So that shows you how many I have. But you're not following along quite yet. So
could have sworn it says here. Look, for the record, it says here following. I did not just press that button. That is what it says.
I guess I'll have to take your word for it. I don't see it on here, but I guess I'll have to take your word for it. What have you got going on for us? What have you got going on inside Hustle World?
All right, nothing too exciting, but I did kind of want to give you guys a little bit of an update about all my rebranding, because essentially all this recovery stuff has not really changed my ultimate trajectory of rebranding my freelance site and, doing it right from the very beginning, right? Before now, I've been all about just being Morgan Overholt, morganoverholt.com, and then being slapped with even a temporary classifier on my actual name in real life. It was a little scary. So I just think I need to actually have a brand that sits on top of my name, right? And no longer just be known as Morgan Overholt. So I am going to instead continue doing this whole freelancer files thing. So here's kind of my progress update that I've shared with y'all. I've revamped my newsletter. So I just took the old freelance newsletter and rebranded it, and I've been sending them out regularly now, like at least once a week. They contain a mixture of news, and they also contain a mixture of freelance tips and advice. What's really interesting is, even though I was not consistent about sending out newsletters before, my nearly 8,000 subs are opening these suckers with a 30% open rate, and I already have one interest in a sponsorship. So that's amazing to me. Yeah, lots of potential there. I also have that book that I promised you guys I'd have done by September 1st. Yeah, it's September 12th and it's still improving, so that didn't quite happen. But I almost hit the deadline, and the book will be my first product as soon as that is completely finished. And that was literally just me moving a lot of my old articles over that I may or may not want to bring over to freelancer files, things that might have been a combination of advice, but also sort of geared toward SEO. And what's crazy is when I finished that, I think I had almost 20,000 words. So it was I think they said the first Harry Potter novel was 78,000 or something like that. So it's a third of the size of the first Harry Potter book, which is pretty substantial, I think. And I'm going to turn that into a bit of a workbook type situation. And then of course, what was the last thing? Oh yeah. And then I also wanted to kind of give you guys a bit of an insight to both a win and a loss. in this whole Facebook page situation. So I know that Jared talked about he talked about his Facebook page last week on the podcast and how he built up this Facebook page based on a dead blog and then eventually gave it away, whatever. And that his page kind of grew organically and it went crazy even after he stopped posting to it and running ads on it, right? And I originally went along with that just as my own private competition in my head. When he was doing his, I tried to build up a freelancing Facebook page. And even though I was able to build a pretty substantial following, I have noticed that content is not really engaging on Facebook. It's not really like taking off. It kind of does require me spending ads on it and really working it. It's not a natural fit for the Facebook platform. But where my socials have taken off, again, kind of going back to that Medium thing, are places like Twitter, are places like LinkedIn, places that are more fit or more meant for content that is a little more business related. And I think it's really important too, because as a side note experiment, when Jared kicked off, or I'm sorry, not Jared, Spencer. So sorry. I'm like looking at you talking about Spencer. But when Spencer kicked off his competition again, or his cohort group stuff in the Niche Pursuits Premium group last week and challenged people again to do the same, I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just literally picked for funsies, like a topic that was built for Facebook this time. Since I know what it's like to build a hard page on Facebook, what if I just pick a content or a topic that I know is built for Facebook? And so I did. I launched that page 3 days ago. I'm not ready to share the topic quite yet, but 3 days ago, I spent $30 on ads and I have over 1,000 followers for $30 worth of ads. This is much easier.
3 cents a like.
This is so much easier. And I'm getting all sorts of organic engagement on stuff I'm not even boosting. Wild. So I will say, y'all, if you're in my position, whether you're like rebranding your site or you're starting a new business or whatever, and you're talking about building up your socials, maybe consider, instead of trying to just do all the socials or just the Facebook, because you heard somebody say they're making a killing on Facebook here or whatever, I've got certain businesses that are killing on Facebook. And I got certain businesses that are dying on Facebook. I've got certain businesses that are killing on Twitter and certain businesses where no one cares about what I'm doing on Twitter. I would say start to consider the ecosystem and how to play those individual ecosystems to your strengths. It's just kind of the advice that I would give as somebody who's out there trying it all in a variety of niches right now.
Yeah, we don't help on this podcast with the shiny object. I mean, we call this the side hustle section, but the original name of it was the shiny object shenanigans, right? And we don't really help with that because every week we kind of feature someone who's just killing it on some platform, right? Like this person is doing whatever on Facebook and on Medium, and on and so it just gets these ideas. But to your point, there's so much of what your lane and what you're good at, and it works really well on probably certain platforms versus other platforms. And you can really get down on yourself if you listen to Brian Nagel come on and talk about Facebook and you're like, what the heck? Andy Scraga did it. Why can't I do it? And to some degree, there is an element of like what fits with the niche.
Mm-hmm. I can already tell this Facebook-centered niche is going to be just 12 times easier than the freelance niche ever was, and probably cost just a fraction of the price. So yeah, I definitely think it's just something worth considering. And it's been a really interesting, expensive, and interesting listen for me too.
This is your bird watching niche?
Not quite. Maybe, I don't know. Is that hot on Facebook? I could make one.
I don't know. Trying to think of things. Every time I think of a hot niche on Facebook, I immediately try to think of like what my mom or grandma, might like. Obviously, there's way more people than that demographic on Facebook, but that's what they're always pinning as such a great place to be for those kind of topics.
Yep. Oh yeah, they're super engaging. It's crazy.
Just so everyone knows, I have no clue what your niche is. I was just kidding. Everyone's going to rush to search bird watching niches on Facebook and see what page might be Morgan's.
Well, I will say though, I mean, I'm pretty open about my travel site is thesmokies.com. And that's kind of where I got the idea. It's my main baby, right? It's about the Smoky Mountains, and our Facebook page is massive and it's saved our butts through the HCU. We wouldn't be in business today if it wasn't for our social media. And like you said, to your point, that is primarily a demographic that's probably, 50 plus, predominantly female, and they're highly engaging. It's probably why it's working on Facebook. So yeah, I don't know. Think about your audience, people.
To your point. Hey, let's move in to our weird niches. I was joking before we started hitting record. We were laughing about last week's weird niche. Maybe 1 minute. You enjoyed last week's weird niche that I made Spencer uncomfortable with, and frankly I was a little uncomfortable with, if I'm being perfectly honest.
My jaw hit the floor. I was listening to that podcast and I'm like, no, he did not bring this up on Spencer's week, because I don't usually watch the visual podcast. I always listen. And I thought about tuning in just to like see how many different shades of red you'd made Spencer turn by bringing that website up. And I, of course, was immediately on my phone like, okay, I'm looking this up and getting my scores and then getting the scores from my girlfriends, because I have so many friends who are like, I need a man who makes 6 figures and is 6'4", and and it's just, I don't know. I cracked me up. I was giggling to myself. So thank you for that one. You are so good at finding these crazy sites, Jared. It's crazy.
If you missed last week, my weird niche was basically a female delusional calculator. And yeah, while we joked that I made Spencer uncomfortable, I'll have to admit I spent about a day or two feeling uncomfortable about how do I talk about this, because I really want to, but I don't really know how to. Kind of found my way about it. This week, I'm not talking about something like that, but it's still an awkward topic, if I'm being perfectly honest, but for a whole different reason. Today's weird niche, and I'll go ahead and pull it up here, and I'll get the URL name correctly. Today's weird niche is the nuke map, nuclearsecrecy.com. And what I have up is the URL nuclearsecrecy.com/nuke map. And yeah, it's kind of what it says. I was sent this by Dan. He sent it to me I don't know, maybe a month or two back. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to talk about that one. And then he reminded me about it. And I started playing around with it. I'm like, actually, it's a pretty cool website if you take away all the just awkwardness to talk about it. So, Morgan, we're going to do a little demonstration here. We got a map up. It looks like it kind of centered my IP address around Los Angeles. I'm actually south of LA, but maybe that's the biggest metropolitan region. So you got this map here, and you can enter in the name of your city, or you can select a preset, or you can drag the marker around, and then you can pick what kind of nuclear, basically what kind of nuclear weapon you want. I'll go with one of the original ones here, the one they nicknamed Fat Man. And you can kind of get into, making it a little bit more interesting, or you can just detonate it and you can see the effects of it. And immediately on the screen, you get this interactive map that shows you the fireball radius, the heavy blast damage radius, the radiation radius, moderate blast damage, thermal radiation radius, and it goes on and on, the light blast damage radius. So it feels kind of, my first thought is, this is, kind of whatever. Who uses this? Well, according to this website, this was created in, I think, 2011, copyrighted 2012, and there have been 348.2 million detonations done on this website. So I got a couple of things to talk about. Really quickly, I will share that if you go over and look at it in Ahrefs, it's a DR71. So yeah, this is a popular site. The broader niche is this idea of nuclear secrecy. It doesn't rank for many keywords. It only ranks for 4,100 keywords, getting 6,400 organic traffic per month. If you look at the keywords it ranks for, it's all these blog posts. I mean, the first one is dating back to 2013. You can just tell by the URL string. And a lot of it is kind of the Manhattan Project, the nuclear secrecy, fallout maps, Oppenheimer, right? That movie that came out about the kind of founder of the nuclear bomb and stuff. So it definitely ranks really well for these somewhat kind of niche down topics. Couple other things, but before we go on, thoughts you want to share about this?
I feel like my face right now is probably like Spencer's face last week. I'm not sure, but I'm both shocked. I was slightly horrified, but now I'm feeling a little bit better, because I'm seeing that at least some of the traffic is coming in, from like the blog posts, like the Oppenheimer stuff. And I'm sure probably the Oak Ridge project, like where I'm from, that was a really big deal. My husband even worked out there at the university in Oak Ridge for a while, where they built the atomic bomb. And so, I could definitely see it from that standpoint. I'm glad that all their traffic isn't just purely coming from things like nuclear, how to detonate a nuclear bomb. I don't know, Jared. I'm nervous to even speak about this topic. I feel like we're trying to tap into that, hey, let's see if we can get the FBI to listen to our podcast demographic right now.
Well, you noticed I haven't used I haven't used a certain word, if we're being clear. I have avoided that on purpose,
Okay. I think I just did it.
Yeah, you ruined it. So now we're on
Oops.
the radar. Yeah, just what Spencer needs. Yeah, here's Oak Ridge, by the way. I pulled it up, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So it looks like it would be, pretty much obliterated. So again, I alluded to it, like this map was kind of the engaging part of it. And I think there's something to be said for it, by the way, tying it all the way back to our original conversation about Danny Sullivan's interview and the helpful content update. I think it's interesting because we're talking about engagement, right? And this is basically a blog. It's a blog about these pretty niche down topics. But at the end of the day, it has this interactive map that clearly is being used 350 million times since it was created. That's creating all this engagement around this website, right? And you look at it, it's a DR71. It's picked up a ton of traffic. It's survived and done well in all these updates. Like, how much of that, like this person created a really interactive map that has components about it, and as difficult as it is to kind of talk about sometimes, like it's right on point with what this website is about. And I wonder if that's part of the reason why this website and the blog content has been so successful.
Is it monetized? I didn't see.
Good
I'm afraid
question.
to click the link on myself. just in case, I'll let you keep clicking on the links.
Well, I'm all in at this point. Dan, when he messaged me about this site, thank you, Dan. He pointed out, he's like, hey, it looks like the big play here is this guy's book. And so he has in the sidebar, which I'd recommend, Dan, get it out of the sidebar and into your content, because that sidebar is at the bottom of all the mobile traffic. But I digress. He wrote a book, it looks like 2021, and that book is being sold on this website. It's on Amazon. If I go over to Amazon and look at it, it looks like it is... it's got 98 ratings, so it's nothing super popular, maybe, but 98 ratings isn't terrible. So I think that's his primary monetization path. I don't think he's got ads on here. Boy, it's funny that when you click on the book, it goes to a different website, alexwellerstein.com, who's the author of the book. He's a historian, a programmer, a professor. So it seems like this is one of those things where he's built a small but loyal following. It seems like he takes a very kind of tactical approach to a lot of these topics, and really, look at this. These slides are very nuanced and in-depth. So looks like an interesting website, especially if you're interested in that. And obviously the map, the interactive map, is certainly the weird kind of off the topic or off the wall sort of thing to share there.
Yeah. Honestly, being from East Tennessee, I grew up 20 minutes outside that town. Like I said, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where they built the atomic bomb. They mentioned it in the Oppenheimer, I cannot speak, movie. So yeah, I definitely know a lot of people who were interested in that topic from a historical standpoint. So I totally understand the niche following there, actually. So yeah, but not exactly a very light find there, Jared, I will say, but always entertaining.
Hey, you know what? I like to bring the heavy topics from your unrealistic expectations of finding men in your life to nuclear stuff.
And by the way, I did send that link from last week to my husband immediately. I said, I'm going to need you to make one of these for the men. Unrealistic expectations for men.
If he makes it,
we're going to have some more sliders.
Maybe we'll feature it here on the podcast.
There you go. Because we're not the only ones with the problem, let me just say. All right, so my website is...
topic. It's good to have a female voice on that topic. Let's move on to your weird niche. I'll pull it up.
All right, my website is quite a bit. It's a palate cleanser, if you will. Quite a bit lighter. We can all have a sigh. All right, but this is actually just a personal favorite of mine, and I wouldn't even say it's very obscure, especially not in my industry, because I'm sure if you're a graphic designer, you have used the heck out of this for years, literally 20 years, because this has been around for quite some time. In fact, the Wayback Machine has it going back all the way to 2001. And guys, it's the Lorem Ipsum generator. Now, a lot of people, you may or may not know, a lot of graphic designers will of course know, but this is kind of that standard filler text, right? So like if you're making a website, or you're making a book, or you're like writing captions or whatever, a lot of times if you need to put some placeholder text in that looks like real text and has a certain flow to it, because if you just type like A, B, 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 C, 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 C on your keyboard, it's not going to have like that realistic flow. You typically go to Lorem Ipsum Dollar. And this website, like I said, been around since 2001, almost unchanged from 2001. I don't know if you want to click on the Wayback Machine link there that I provided, but that's what's wild about it. I mean, aside from just a little bit of responsiveness added somewhere along the line, the layout is almost exactly the same. They've added a few ads over the years, but this is wild. This was basically like a set it and forget it for these people, all right? It not only produces text and blocks of Lorem Ipsum Dollar, but it will do so in a variety of languages. And on their website, it says they're always looking to add additional languages to continue to be able to produce that text. It also gives a fascinating history of Lorem Ipsum Dollar, which if you're a dork like me, you'll really appreciate, because this is some really old text, guys. Like, according to the website, it says, contrary to popular belief, Lorem Ipsum is not simply random text. It has roots in a piece of classical Latin literature from 45 BC, making it over 2,000 years old. And it has been the industry standard dummy text since the 1500s. It was made so when an unknown printer took a galley of type and scrambled it into a type to make it turn it into a specimen for a book. And it's been used ever since. Even today, platforms like Adobe, they have systems that you can automatically input Lorem Ipsum Dollar. But graphic designers like me, who are starting to show their age, might I say, we tend to still go to lipsum.com. And again, I have literally been using this website for 20 years, which is probably why it has a DA of 63, 70,000 keywords, 2 million backlinks, and 1.9 million in monthly traffic. And I also just want to give this little quote out because for some reason I've always found it beautiful. But if you've ever wondered what Lorem Ipsum Dollar actually means, there is a section that roughly translates to, there is no one who loves pain itself, who seeks after it and wants to have it simply because it is pain. Isn't that beautiful?
Boy, you really did bring the palate cleanser to the end of the podcast here. How does it rank for 27,000 keywords?
Well, 70,000 keywords, according to SEMrush. But obviously, most of them are things like Lorem Ipsum Dollar Generator or trying to find out the history of it, what have you. So a lot of the keywords are really similar. But I, too, was surprised by that metric.
Yeah, boy.
But more surprising, like I said, was the fact this site has not changed. I mean, they literally built this site back in 2001, and it basically looks almost exactly the same today. I mean, how many websites can you think of that have been unchanged for 20 years and are still rocking? In fact, doing better than it ever has been. It's like at the top of its charts right now.
You're being generous when you say they've added a few ads. I would say they've added quite a bit more than a few ads, but good for them. High time they monetize and profit off that traffic they're getting. It's fascinating because you didn't even touch on it. I think Lorem Ipsum immediately for an SEO, which I know you're not by trade, triggers the famous Lorem Ipsum that is ranking. I believe it was Kyle Roof who kind of first kicked that off and has become kind of a bit of a cult classic. So I think it has so many meanings, not only in your community of graphic designers, freelance writers, this sort of thing, but also to the SEO community.
Yeah. There's something that's kind of nostalgic about it, and every once in a while I met with a client who's never seen it before, and they're always like, what is this weird Latin filler or whatever this weird text is in my document? And I'm like, oh, let me tell you about Lorem Ipsum Dollar. And there was a time in my life, Jared, I was so geeky I could even write out the entire first sentence of Lorem Ipsum without looking. Gosh. But now I'm down to the first 5 words.
I used to be able to do the first 30 numbers of pi. So it's okay.
Yes. See, okay. Yeah, different breeds of geek, but I appreciate that.
It's all good. It's all good. I got retribution in the end. My one of my children was born on Pi Day, so it all worked out for me memorizing all that.
How'd you swing that one? That's pretty good.
I don't know, the math gods were looking down on me with fate, I suppose.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's a good find actually, because I think to your point, name another website on the internet that looks virtually identical as it did 20 years ago and still ranks and gets as much traffic as it does today. I mean, that is the outlier of all outliers. You're right. We had it up on the Wayback Machine. It looks exactly the same aside from the ads. And you're right. It's still doing really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Despite, having things like ChatGPT and Adobe and other ways to insert that filler text, a lot of us are still going back and using lipsum.com like we have forever. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
I saw you could donate on there. I wonder how many donations they get. I hear like almost like a loyalty in your voice. I usually say like that donation button, I cannot imagine it working very well, but this might be the one website where I would say, you know, they might actually be getting some donations based on the way you and probably a lot of others talk about it.
Maybe I need to go hit that donate button. Now I'm feeling guilty, Jerry. I don't think I've done that yet.
Well, it's a call to action. All of you Lorem Ipsum users, maybe this is where you ought to, channel your efforts. So, well, I think that about brings us to a close here. Another week in the books, quite a good number of topics to digest. I think I hope a lot of you go to the show notes and take advantage of these different articles, because a lot of these were difficult to summarize in depth on a podcast. We tried to do our best to give you the high levels, the things we thought were really interesting, the conversational points, but certainly that interview with Danny Sullivan and a few of the other things we shared are worth maybe reading over the weekend and whatnot. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will see you again next week. Morgan, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to fill in when needed.
We'll see you guys next week. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Hey there, thanks so much for listening to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Did you know that Jared and I are members of a private group called the Niche Pursuits Community? And today I want to share with you how you can join for just $1. The Niche Pursuits Community is a private members area for niche online publishers to mastermind and grow their businesses together. We hold weekly calls live with experts where you can ask questions. These experts share tips on Amazon Influencer, Google Discover, building email newsletters, getting traffic from Facebook, and other strategies to grow your online business. You'll also be assigned a mastermind group of 4 or 5 other people in a similar stage in business as you. Dive deep into your business issues and get your problems solved. If you use coupon code PODCAST at checkout, you'll get your first month for just $1. Go ahead and give it a try. Come join me, Jared, and lots of other digital entrepreneurs inside my private group at community.nichepursuits.com. And be sure to use coupon code PODCAST. I'll see you on the inside.